Hi, it's Jason Glover for ThatShelf.com. We're just leaving the Princess of Wales Theatre where we had the world premiere of Steven Spielberg's film, The FABELMANs. I'm plotzing. I'm quelling. I'm all the terrible Yiddish I know. I was, gotta say, a little bit trepidatious about the film. We're going to go through, well, first of all, what we're walking through here is the craziness of King Street. Festival experience, really sort of closing the street and making you feel a little bit like the center of the world. Might not be quite that, but it's still pretty spectacular to actually have this stuff taking place during festival, making this area, this part of town, truly feel like the nexus of everything that's taking place during TIFF. They've worked so many decades to actually make this happen, moving it, once they put the light box down here, moving it from some of the more disparate areas of the city down to this core. The addition of the Royal Alex being the sort of latest puzzle piece. I was just in the Princess of Wales, which is right beside it. Regardless, that's all TIFF inside baseball nonsense. Specifically, what's going on with Spielberg's film is this. It could absolutely be schmaltzy, it could be manipulative, it could be cloying, it could be yet another old man looking back on his career and showing what a precocious and brilliant child he was and how amazing his family was. And people honking at me as they're driving down streets they shouldn't actually be driving on, but that's a whole nother thing. But as it all sort of plays out, you actually have this remarkable film by a truly extraordinary filmmaker who so often is sort of underappreciated. Just this guy who does films simply to be audience pleasing. It's just a beautiful film, a beautiful reflection, a rumination upon that period of his childhood. Do not dismiss the collaborator. Steven Spielberg is credited writing the script with Tony Kushner. They sort of hinted at it in the Q&A, which is going to be posted in full on this channel, that there were like therapy sessions. It sounds like what was happening is that Mr. Spielberg would sort of speak to these key moments, and Kushner, who's just a beautiful writer, just an absolutely stellar writer, transformed it into this fictionalized version of this kid growing up an outsider, someone just open-eyed gazing at the wonder of film and just thinking that he could do that. Now, in my own life, Spielberg played that role in really fundamental ways, changing the way that I experience cinema. Not just my love of film is so closely tied to him. I'm the perfect generation to see something like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Absolutely transformative. From that, I went back to the John Fords and all the other elements. Things like seeing Jurassic Park and being fascinated by the technology. Obviously, the work that he did through all the decades, going back and seeing some of his more slightly personal films. Empire of the Sun comes to mind. Him doing things that he was out of his element in some ways, but still managing to make it work. Some films of his absolutely do not work for me and continue to not do so. Ones where it felt that he was just trying too hard to make something where it wasn't really in place for him to make. And so I went into this uncertain which one I was going to get. Was I going to get something like, I don't know, like an Amistad, which is super earnest, trying so hard to be what it is and not really coming together? Or even Warhorse, which is, again, has moments of brilliance but doesn't quite connect? Or was it going to be one of his great works, something like a Munich or a Lincoln, or just something that sort of speaks to the greater levels of his, not only his craft, I mean, he obviously knows how to move a camera and where to shoot and how to actually elicit performances from people, but was it going to be a film that absolutely stood as one of the great films of Spielberg? And look, I just watched it 10 minutes ago. I'm not being overly hyperbolic, but I think that this is at least part of that conversation. This truly feels like a film that really does work in the way that it needs to, that it's accomplished by somebody that has enough artistic distance from his own childhood to tell the story in a way which is effective, to communicate, to allow the performances to actually breathe, to see the subtleties of character, to not have everyone be a saint, to even his filmmaking precocity is sort of slightly tempered by this really darkly comedic sort of vision of childhood during this period. The way he interacts, there's just with some of the high school relationships he have are just downright hilarious. Like, it is broadly funny in a way that was slightly surprising. It never really devolves into something that's like maudlin or just overly arch. It just feels like a beautiful reflection upon a particular period of time that absolutely informs his current work and his work for decades. But this film itself feels fresh. It doesn't feel simply looking backwards. It feels like something new and something now. That his maturation, his continued maturation as an artist, his continued pushing as an artist, allows him to make a film with this much robustness, this much character, this much love. The lead performances are great. Paul Dano, Michelle Williams, Gabrielle, this new kid, took the role. Seth Rogen shows up in this. He provides a three-dimensionality to a character that in lesser films would have been two-dimensional. And then Judd Hirsch. Judd Hirsch just shows up and just steals the scene, steals up one particular scene and just kills it. Just absolutely rocks. David Lynch shows up briefly. But fundamentally, this is a story where you know you're telling a fictionalized version, but there's so many echoes, there's so many beautiful moments that just remind you what a gift it is to have, to walk, to breathe the same air as a filmmaker of the caliber of Steven Spielberg, somebody who has fundamentally transformed world cinema in ways, better for worse, more than almost any director in the history of Hollywood. He truly, when the story of Spielberg is written, he will be etched onto that mountaintop as one of the truly great visionary directors. And this is a film made by that director, reflecting upon those things that shaped him. And in so doing, it doesn't feel self-centered, it doesn't feel narcissistic. It feels beautiful. It feels like another captivating thing. It's some things that European directors do all the time. For God's sakes, Fellini made a career out of this. We've seen Roma, we've seen Belfast, we've seen a lot of old men looking back at the past movies, and it's easy to sort of conflate them all together. But I genuinely think that FABELMANS does something different, because it's not just about one guy and his memories. It is not that all of those are. I think Roma is extraordinary, for example. But it certainly feels, through fictionalization, like it's a beautiful character piece in a way that Spielberg's not always given credit for. It's a piece where its showiness is dialed down in terms of its visual impact, its kineticism. And instead, we have something that's quiet but incredibly effective. John Williams does the score. Janusz Kaminski shoots it. Michael Kahn is one of the co-editors. The old team is back. There's some beautiful piano music used throughout. Obviously, Spielberg's mother was a concert pianist, or at least a trained pianist, extraordinary talent. But there are moments that are almost archaic in terms of film score from John Williams in the best possible way. It's almost like no other film composer would have the chutzpah to actually just say, you know what, this is an emotional moment. I'm gonna lean into it. I'm going to provide this, and so it works. The collaboration between Williams and Spielberg is the absolute stuff of legend, and I think it's a lovely score that dares occasionally to let you know about it, to say that this is a moment that it's okay for you to feel some pathos, some joy, some silliness, and all of that stuff. FABELMANS, I just think is a truly, truly wonderful film, and I'm so grateful that it was actually brought here. This is the first time, according to Spielberg, the first time that he's ever had a film in competition at a festival. I saw him at Cannes, he did BFT, but he's never actually had a film as part of the People's Choice thing. Does this stand a good chance of winning the People's Choice Award? It does. Independent of that, does it deserve attention at awards time? Sure. But am I just pleased that a master filmmaker has brought this gift of this film to this audience that was so appreciative, of so into what the gifts that it was providing us? Absolutely. I think The Fabelmans is in many ways, just immediately on first viewing, just a treasure from a great filmmaker, unafraid to dive into nostalgia but not get lost in it, to dive into emotionality without becoming maudlin, to dive into deep character beats without it becoming didactic, to dive into a very specific culture without losing its sense of universality. I think this is a terrific film, and I look forward to audiences getting a chance to see it in weeks and months to come. For ThatShelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe, follow us on social media, and we will see you next video. All the best. Take care.